Alright, Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone and Rule Well, and Shalom to Akim that are teaching this word around the globe with faith and truth and sincerity. As always, I'm the brother Caleb from the GMS London Forecasters Camp, coming back at you with another lesson to hopefully help edify the Lord's elect. As always, I'd like to begin by saying that we are the real Hebrew Israelites. The real Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, West Indians, and West Africans predominantly. However, you are going to get Israelites that do look like the other nations, because Israel, as a people, has been scattered amongst all people for our various captivities. But if your seed line by your forefathers goes back to the man in the Bible that was named Israel, then you too are an Israelite, no matter what you may look like, because the book of Numbers, chapter 1 and verse 18 states that your nationality is determined by the lineage of your forefathers, okay? So I'm going to make another attempt at this, basically, of sharing my testimony story, because did a video a few weeks ago where I began to share the testimony, but for one reason or another, you know, things got in the way and I didn't speak about this again. But the Spirit's on me now to do it, and my mindset is to just do it, man, and get it out there, because a lot of this stuff I've lived through it, but there's been times when I've tried to share it before and it hasn't worked, or it hasn't been the right time, I should say. And sometimes I'll say little bits here and there. Forgive me, it's like sometimes I'll say little bits here and there. You know, I've shared bits and pieces with certain brothers, you know. But I think it's high time for me to put this all out, to just put it out, man. Because at the end of the day, let me share a parable before I start this. Bear with me while I get this preset. So like, I'm just pulling up a precept. I'm just flying in the spirit here. I don't have anything pre-prepared, so just bear with me. Right, so this is in Luke, right? Let me get this parable to preface this. Right, this is Luke 19 verse 12, and this is an explanation. When I say this parable, you understand where my mindset's at, right? Luke 19 verse 12, he said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, occupy till I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a message after him. Yeah, this is the right one, yeah. But let me start again. Luke 19:12. And he said, therefore, a certain nobleman went into a far country to receive for himself a kingdom and to return. And he called his 10 servants and delivered them 10 pounds and said unto them, occupy till I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a message after him, saying, we will not have this man reign over us. And it came to pass that when he was returned, having received the kingdom, then he commanded these servants to be called unto him to whom he had given the money, that he might know how much every man had gained by trading. Then came the first, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 10 pounds. And he said unto him, well, thou good servant, because thou hast been faithful over very little, have thou authority over 10 cities. There came, and the second came, saying, Lord, thy pound hath gained 5 pounds. And he said likewise unto him, be thou also over 5 cities. And there came another, saying, Lord, behold, here is thy pound, which I have kept laid up in a napkin. For I feared thee, because thou art an austere man. Thou takest up that thou layest not down, and thou reapest that thou did not sow. And he said unto him, out of thine own mouth I will judge thee, thou wicked servant. Thou knewest that I was an austere man, taking up that I laid down not, and reaping that I did not sow? Wherefore then gavest not thou my money into the bank, that at my coming I might have required mine own with usury? And he said unto them that stood by, Take from him the pound, and give it to him that hath 10 pounds. And they said unto him, Lord, he hath 10 pounds. For I say unto you, that unto every one which hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath shall be taken away from him. But those mine enemies which would that I should not reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. So why am I mentioning that parable? Because the way I feel about this, like for example, these testimony stories, is that the Most High has given me certain experiences that I've obviously lived through, and I've gained a lot of wisdom through the life experiences that I've endured. And at the end of the day, the Most High put me through those experiences in order to build me up in the spirit. But there's also the possibility that it may boost other people's faith in the spirit to hear what I might have to say. And it might help to boost someone else's faith, because, not going to lie, man, I get very edified when I hear other brothers' testimonies and the things that they've endured and gone through. Different life circumstances, man. No two brothers in this truth is going to come to this thing from the exact same position, even if you're physical brothers, because everybody's got their own personal journey. And the scriptures say that we're supposed to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. So, my journey is not going to be someone else's journey. Someone else's journey is not going to be my journey. But the fact of the matter is, by listening and learning, you can grow thereby if the testimony is a sincere edification of the works of Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. So let's get into it, right? So I don't want to spend too long retreading what I already said, because if you scroll back through my videos, you can see the first testimony I did. But because it's been a while since I followed up on that, I'm just going to reiterate a few points to kind of set the scene. Then I'm going to move into other stuff or later experiences that I had in my... I'm really going to be talking about my early childhood here, but we'll see how far I get with this, right? So, as I said before, in the other testimony, I have memories of before I was born. For example, being in my mother's room. And I don't usually talk to people about this a lot. And this is something that I've never really liked to talk to people about, because most people in the world are incredulous. What I mean by incredulous is that they have a lot of disbelief, especially when it comes to spiritual things. And obviously in this society, most people believe erroneously that life starts when the baby's born, but that's not true. Because in the book of Jeremiah, it says, I knew thee from the womb and I formed thee. Let me get that. Before, let me get it. Right, this is Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. So that means the Most High knew who his prophets were, even when we was in the womb. And before that, because the scriptures say that the elect were predestined from the foundation of the earth. Lord willing, I pray and I hope that I'm of the elect, but only time will tell. But so yeah, I have these vague memories of before I was born, and before I came into this world, I kind of knew that I was going to be coming into a world of wickedness, and I didn't want to leave the place where I was, because I felt like there was angels surrounding me and I was in a safe place. And I knew that when I came into this world, I was going to forget things. It's like, imagine if you're with familiar company, right? Imagine you're a familiar company and you know that you've got to go on a long journey, and that it's going to be a long journey before you're going to be able to be around this presence again. That's exactly how I felt. So like, I didn't want to leave that safe place, and I knew I was going to be separated from my power, which is Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. Obviously back then I didn't know the names Yahweh or Yahushai. I just knew God, and like most Jesus, right? When I came into the world, I was taught Jesus. But the fact of the matter is that I felt like I was going to be separated from my power, and that I was going to go on a long journey and I wouldn't be coming back for a very long time. That's kind of how I felt before I was born, and then I was born. So I was born, and I have the Most High has blessed me with a very sharp memory. So I can recall events I've kind of always been cognizant of what's going on around me. So from that point, I was born. Then my early memories start when I was, maybe two and a half. Being in the cot, I was very aware that I was in a cot and I wanted to get out and play and stuff. And in our past testimony, I mentioned that I was quite, very self-confident child, and I was very daring. And I suppose I still am to this day, but obviously I temper it with sound judgment. But when you're young, you don't really have um, wisdom of judgment. So, I was quite the sort of outgoing young boy, toddler. I'm talking about when I was like two and a half, coming on to 3. Yeah, I was very daring. I used to love like doing things that overcame fears, like jumping off of things, sliding downstairs, front ways, and I was just very kind of like bold in like bravery, right? And that's something that's still carried through to me with me to this day. But that's something that early on that I always wanted to be brave. I never wanted to be a coward, So around 2:30 is when I started to kind of sense that, hang on a minute, my mum and my dad are arguing, and the spirit put it in my head that maybe they're gonna separate, and that's kind of weird because what child ever thinks that, And I remember, as I said in my last testimony video, I heard them arguing downstairs one night, and I said to my brother, I want to go downstairs. He's like, no, don't go downstairs. Mum and dad are talking. But I went out anyway, called down the stairs, and I found my mum and my dad arguing in the living room. And I was upset, and they were like, oh, don't worry, everything's fine, we're just talking, blah, 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 blah. And I was worried that they were going to separate. The spirit put it in my head. Well, lo and behold, not long after that, there was a night when I was in my parents' bed with my brother, and we were lying there, and my mum comes in one night and she says, make sure you get a lot of sleep because we're going somewhere special tomorrow. And at the time, as young children, we were thinking, oh, are we going to go to like Disneyland or something like that? Because I was born in the 80s. Back then, every child wanted to go to Disney World or whatever. She said, you'll see tomorrow, it's a surprise. Now, prior to this, there had been some days where I'd gone out with my mum and we was looking around a house, and the house was empty, and I didn't know why we was there, but there was obviously, I guess, maybe someone from the council or whatever showing my mum around this house. I didn't think much of it. I just thought, well, this is a bit odd, but I didn't understand why we were there. Well, the very next day, my mum took me and my brother and we moved into this house, which is the house I currently live in. And back then, it was just a shell. Basically, it was floorboards, just pure wood, and they weren't the type of like floors you get now where it's like laminate floor and all the slats of the wood are stuck together, joined together in a seamly fashion. No, this is just like the floorboards that you have underneath the house, where it's just there's gaps in between them, there's splinters, stuff like that. There was no curtains at all. There was no heating system in this place at all, and no wallpaper, no curtains, no furniture, nothing. It was just literally a shell. We had a bath, we had a toilet. That's pretty much it. Like, bath, toilet, kitchen sink, bathroom sink, and that's pretty much all that was here. And so my mum brought us to this place, and for me, it was like psychologically, it's like, whoa. It was a complete contrast to how I was living before, because before I had the safety and security of being in my father's home, where there's carpet on the floor, there's wallpaper on the walls, there's curtains on the windows, there was TVs, there was radios, everything that we kind of you would imagine in a normal home we had. And I went from having that stuff to having absolutely nothing, and basically it was like a real shock to the system, because I was like, why are we here? I didn't understand at first. I didn't understand, why are we here? When are we going home? And my mum would say, this is your home now, this is our home now. And I'd be like, when am I going to get to see my dad again? Because I've always been very close to my dad in terms of you know, when I talk to my dad, it's like we can reason on things, if that makes sense. Now, my dad doesn't fully understand this truth. Lord willing, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shah will help to open his full understanding. But the fact of the matter is that even from an early age, my dad and I were very close. Now, I want to give a brief little testimony on that, because when I talk to my dad these days, or even, talk to him in the past, my dad always tells a particular story. Now, before I left, was it before I left? Yeah, it was. So before I left, because I left my dad's house when I was about three and a half, actually, 3.5. But prior to that, my dad tells me this testimony story of my dad's a tradesman. By his trade, he learned to be an electrician. But he knows how to do all kinds of stuff, like most like he's a jack of all trades. I mean, his primary trade was being an electrician, but he can do plastering, he can do flooring, he can do all kinds of stuff with his hands because he's used to working with his hands. So back when I used to live with both my parents, my dad tells me the story of one day he was putting a new bathtub in the bathroom in that place, and he's fixing it up. And he said, one day I was just sitting there and he was working and he was talking to me. And he said to me, when he was talking, I was asking him questions. And at first he was like, oh, he's just, little baby asking questions. But he said, after a while, he was working and he had to stop because he's like, hang on a minute. This is a little, like, 2.5-year-old child. Why is he asking these kind of questions? And how is he following the conversation, like, coherently? Because that's what my dad said. He says, I've always been very sharp and I'm a quick learner, which by the spirit of Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shai has been proven to be true. But he says he was talking to me and he realized that, hang on a minute, the questions I was asking, he said he felt like he was talking to a much older child than just a little baby, because I was about 2.5 at that time. And he said from that point on, he said in his mind, I'm not going to talk to this little boy like he's a baby. I'm going to talk to him on a level because he can hold a conversation. So that's kind of always how my dad has dealt with me, in the sense that he never talked down to me. And that's something that, I'm not a father, but if I had a child, right, when you start talking to the child and you're like, oh, boo, 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 and I'm talking like, oh, boo, 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 all this kind of bullshit, right? That's not really helping the child's cognitive development. That's actually slowing the child's development down. Whereas if you treat the child with a certain level of if you talk to it, basically, let's put it this way, you get out what you put in. Now, not every spirit's going to be the same, but my point is this: if you're treating the child like a baby and coddling it and all this kind of stuff, the child's going to be a baby because that's what you're feeding it. But if you feed the child intellectual things, the child will then take it on and grow, because you can't really underestimate children, man. Children are born to be like, just soak up information and, to learn things, which is why they say it's easier to teach a child than it is to teach an adult. Because when you're trying to teach an adult, you're coming up against all kinds of mental blocks, barriers, and all kinds of other shit that you have to deal with. But a child kind of comes to it with a sense of innocence, which is why Yahweh Shai said to Nicodemus, you need to be born again, to have the mindset of a child. And when you come to this truth, when you learn you're an Israelite and you come to this truth, you have to be born again. You have to forget what you knew in the world and start over. And sometimes that's a stumbling block for people, because pride gets in the way. And the scriptures say, only by pride cometh contention. And adults are very proud, but pride was not made for men, But I could get some scriptures up going into that, but you just read the Proverbs, the 3rd chapter, that talks about pride, I believe. Is it Proverbs 3 or Proverbs 7? Let me just get that for edification's sake. Proverbs 3. Get in the real scriptures. This is Proverbs chapter 3. Is it verse 7, I think? No, it's not Proverbs 3. It's Proverbs 7 then. Proverbs 6, Salakia. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. This is Proverbs 6:16. These 6 things doth Yahweh hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look. So the Most High hates a proud look. And a lot of the adults in this world, they're proud, man. And a lot of them have no reason to be proud because they've got an overinflated sense of self-worth that gives them this sense of pride. And that's bullshit, man. But again, when I go through the testimony, I'm going to talk about a lot of things. And the Most High really had to smash me down to take pride out of me. And looking back now, I can see exactly why he did it, because there are times when I got a bit puffed up and I got a bit proud and I had to be humbled, man. And that's the whole point of these testimonies, because we're supposed to be humbled, you know, before we can serve the Lord properly. We have to be humbled, man. Got to go low before the Most High can exalt us on high. So I'll keep going, right? These 6 things doth Yahweh hate. 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, and feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord amongst brethren. So anyway, back to the testimony. So we were brought to this house, and it was a real system shock for me, because coming from a place of security and comfort and warmth, because this place is very cold, there was no heating, to basically living on floorboards, hardly having anything to eat. And when we did eat, we weren't sitting at a dining table. We were sitting pretty much on the floor with no table. And I think in the beginning we was eating off paper plates. We had no dishes, and we was pretty much eating beans on toast. And that was a very, very harsh slap to the face for me, because prior to that, I'd taken things for granted. I took my security for granted. I took having my dad around for granted. I took having my whole family together for granted. And I was saying these things to myself in my mind. I was basically saying, look, man, the problem that's occurred here is because you, meaning me, I didn't pay enough attention. That I blamed myself. Because usually in the past, I was more inclined to blame myself than I was to attribute blame to someone else, because I felt like I needed to be responsible. You know, it's just this kind of sense that I've got that usually I'll be looking, before I'm looking to point the finger at other people, usually I start at home, right? So I was looking at myself and saying, it's because you didn't pay enough attention to what was going on around you that this situation has occurred. And now you're pretty much in hell, like catching hell. So from that point on, I said to myself, look, don't take anything for granted ever, right? And always pay attention. So instead of speaking, make sure you pay attention to every little thing. And I started to develop what could pretty much be called, for want of a better term, a detective's mindset. When I say a detective's mindset, like, for example, I'd be just looking around and watching everybody's actions and watching where everything is and trying to memorize things. Like, so if someone said a sentence to me, I'd memorize what they would say and I'd keep it in my head and think, okay, because from that point I never trusted adults, because I thought to myself, hang on a minute, my mum never told us that she's bringing us into this hell, so therefore I can't trust my mother. That's how I felt. I felt like I couldn't trust her. And I also thought, well, look, man, if your mother's going to do that to you, what would other adults in the world do? You know, other adults won't tell the truth. So you've got to pay attention to everything everybody says. So in my head, I've kind of like got this tape recorder kind of playing, and it's still going to this day, of whenever anybody says anything to me, it's natural, because when I was young, I trained myself to do this. I just remember things. So when someone says something to me, I'm recording and I'm thinking, okay. And when they talk to me again, I'm matching. Okay, like, you know, when you see in the films where, I don't know, some kind of investigation, and they tape someone's phone call and they show is it the sonograph? But they've got one voice speaking and you have another voice speaking, and then they match the signals, and it's like, okay, this correlates. Well, that's kind of what's going on in my head when when I'm talking to people, when I'm engaging with people. It's just, I started doing this very young, and I didn't even know what I was doing, but it led me to have this kind of mindset. And also, for example, my memory in terms of, forgive me, I'll get that in a minute. My memory in terms of, like, I just remember faces. Like, if I'm walking down the road, right, and I walk into Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever it is, and I see someone, I'll be like, okay, that's that person. And then if I walk out the shop and I'm walking down the road and I see that person at a bus stop, I remember the face. I'm like, okay, that was the person I saw earlier. So I've kind of got like, almost like a photographic memory for faces. It's just how I grew up, by disciplining myself to do these things early on in life. Now I'm in my adult life, it's carried on, and it's almost like a second nature to me, where I do this stuff without even thinking about it. I don't even have to focus, it just happens. So and also when I was small and that happened, like, and when I used to say to my mum, when am I going to see my dad again? And she's like, oh, I don't know. To me, that was my first experience of death, because at the time, the only thing I could equate how I was feeling is that my dad is dead, because I ain't seen him anymore, and I don't know when I'm going to see him anymore, ever again, or if at all. So I was feeling that, I suppose you could say, the bereavement of having lost my father. So I was going through all this. First of all, it was like a bit of self-hatred combined with a bit of bereavement, and also combined with a lot of fear, because I was terrified, because I thought to myself, because we're so poor, maybe one day when I'm out, my mum will take me somewhere and she'll just leave me and abandon me somewhere, so that she and my brother can have a better quality of life. Because at the time I was living with my mum and my middle brother. I've got an older brother, but he's got a different mother, but we're brothers because your lineage is determined by the lineage of your forefathers. But I didn't grow up in the same household as him, so it's just me and my middle brother. So at that time, I didn't tell anybody what I was thinking, because I didn't trust anybody. So I didn't tell my mum, look, I'm feeling sad because I'm not seeing my dad, blah, 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 blah. But it came out in other ways. For example, I lost my appetite. I stopped eating, and I started to see faces in food. Like, I know a lot of children see faces in food, but to me, it's like, if my mum put food in front of me, sometimes I'd look at it and it'd be like, I'd see scary faces in like, if it's a plate of rice or something, I'd see scary faces in it. I'd be like, I don't want to eat it. Now, at the time, my mum she went through a lot of hardship trying to get me to eat. But one of the reasons why that was occurring and I didn't have an appetite for things is because now I'm later on in life, I understand that fasting and prayer is something that is natural to us as Israelites. When we're catching hell, one of the first things you should be doing is obviously praying to the Most High that He can alleviate your situation, but also fasting is very important. So when I wasn't eating, and a lot of times my mum would try and get me to eat, and I would have a very poor appetite, it was because I felt so grieved in the spirit that naturally I just took to fasting. I didn't even know it's fasting at the time. And that's why it's beautiful to kind of examine myself and go back over the course of my life and look at these things now with a spiritual understanding. Having read the Holy Scriptures, I have an understanding of certain things better than I did at that time. So moving on, another thing I used to do as well is, I mentioned this to brothers, man. I've got kind of hobbies and stuff like most brothers do, but at the time, because we never had nothing, all I had was a few toys that I had. Now, I was born in the early 80s, so at the time I was really into He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So I had a He-Man figure, and I remember my mum bought me a Skeletor figure. And those were basically all I had, and I was just playing with them. And for me, that was my way of escaping reality, because when I was playing, I'd be making up stories, and in my mind, I'd be having fantasies about, doing adventures with these figures and having battles and stuff. But I remember when I got the Skeletor toy, for those of you who don't know He-Man, go look it up. But I remember I got the Skeletor toy, and I remember it was a skull for a face, and I was looking at it and thinking, oh, that looks scary. And because it represents death, you know, when you see a skull or a skeleton, usually that's equated with death. But I still enjoyed the toys because I used to play. It's called Masters of the Universe, right? So basically, these characters are trying to become the master of the universe. And really, that's like, you know, someone trying to get all the power of the universe and become like the Most High. Now, I could do a deep breakdown spiritually on He-Man, um, going into that stuff, you know, it's spiritual symbolism and stuff, but I'm not going to do that. But the fact of the matter is, that's what I was playing and that's what I was into. And that whole idea of like, you know, I always believed in God, right? Like most Jake, we believe in God, whereas most Edomites don't believe there's a higher power. I always believed in God, so that's one of the reasons why that concept grabbed me so much. Like the idea of there's someone evil who's trying to get the birthright that they lost. Skeletor, he lost his birthright, right? And he's trying to get that birthright back and become the master of the universe. So I was playing this adventure, and that's where I just loved it so much because that was my fantasy world. And I used to watch the cartoon when it came on TV, and every episode had a moral to it, you know. And from watching that, because when my dad wasn't around so much, well, I used to watch this before I left my dad, right? But I always used to like it because there was always a moral to the story. Like it wasn't just, oh, this happened and that's the end. No, it was causing you to think about, okay, what circumstances led to this event happening and what was the outcome, and how could the outcome of been better or worse depending on what particular characters did. So it always got me thinking in that type of sense. And for me, that was where a lot of my strong sense of morality was first kind of set on, if that makes sense. Because I've always had like a very strong sense of like justice and right and wrong, and that comes back to having good role models, man. And I've said this before, a lot of Jake in the world today, they didn't grow up, I suppose some of them didn't grow up in the era that I grew up in, and the quality of content on television these days is purely wicked. You know, it's all steeped in Satanism and trying to get people to do wicked things. So therefore, a lot of young Jake in the world, be it male or female, they've got not a very strong moral compass. And by not having a very strong moral compass, it makes the world more and more wicked and more satanic. So I'm very grateful to those early influences that I had. But the reason why I'm mentioning that I used to play with these toys is because what I used to do is I used to treat them like they were people, in the sense that I would never want to break them. I'd always be very careful with them and I never want to lose them, because I felt like, okay, if it breaks, I might not get another one.